So when Dr. So asked me to speak at your convocation, I was really pleased. And then he told me that students had actually requested me, and I was absolutely over the moon, because in the life of a teacher, that is a rare treat, to have students who actually want to listen to you. Because most of the time it's quite the opposite. They have to listen to you, and sometimes we can actually tell that they're not that thrilled to be there. But there was a catch, as there always is. I could barely enjoy the invitation to speak before he suggested that there were two things I needed to do. It could not be a typical graduation speech, and you can't give advice, he said. And if you know Dr. So, he didn't say much more. He just said, so think about that. And boy did I think. I thunk and I thunk and I thunk, and you all better know that's not a word. You're in the honors program. And I was tempted, because I felt so challenged by this, to take a page out of the book of many of my students who fervently believe that they should leave all their big assignments until the last possible moment, because they work so well under pressure. I know better. Anyone out there who believes that, and I know who you are, I can see you, Jake, will eventually learn, probably the hard way, that that's just a little story we tell ourselves to justify procrastinating. So I did not procrastinate. Instead, I decided to think about other rare treats for a teacher. Those lessons, which are few and far between, when students are completely focused on what we're learning and talking about, and the air is alive with possibilities. And that does happen. One of those times is when we discuss emotions in the interpersonal communication course. Specifically when I show the documentary film Happy, which is on Netflix, if you're interested. It is my great privilege to share this film with my students every single semester, because I need to see it that often to remember its life-changing lessons. So I'm going to hope not to give actual advice, but I do hope to share some amazing truths about one of the things we are guaranteed by our Constitution. There's life, there's liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At this point in most of your lives, you're hiking through the really rough terrain of an educational journey you started in kindergarten. And you've been told repeatedly that education is the key to your success. Inevitably, when you ask people to define success, however, they do not mention happiness, at least not at first. What do you think they say? Money. But sooner or later, they do get around to saying that ultimately they want to be happy. Since the 1990s, there has been a great deal written and said about IQ versus EQ. IQ we know about. We're honor students. It's the measure of our intelligence. EQ is another term for emotional intelligence. And that's the ability to identify and manage emotions, to recognize them in others, not just yourself, and to really try to feel what others might be feeling and respond with empathy. Chances are your intelligence is a big piece of who you are and how you see yourself. And with life experience, the EQ develops as well. But it turns out that's not enough. All the IQ and EQ in the world will not guarantee happiness. Money does. No, I'm kidding. But we will talk about money in a little bit. First, it's important to note that the academic study of happiness is one of the major movements of the last 20 years. They said, if we can study why people are depressed, why can't we study how to be happy and what will keep us happy? The class on happiness offered by Dr. Daniel Gilbert at Harvard University is the most popular class on campus, and over 1,000 students take it every semester. And Dr. Gilbert also wrote a book called Stumbling on Happiness. It's a New York Times bestseller and the recipient of numerous other awards. Why is this movement so great? I think the answer is obvious. We struggle with ways to be happy. And I think it's it's precisely because in our Western world and our ideology, the things we assume will make us happy very often do not. And it's really awful to find that out after working for so long. So let's get the money thing over with. Let's start with the numbers. It's ridiculous to say that money doesn't buy happiness. Because if you don't have enough money for the basics, life is really difficult. And as college students, I know you don't have enough money. Neither did I. And I clearly remember the days when my car breaking down really meant economic disaster. That might do me in. So it's hard to relax and smell the roses and live in the moment when the moment is very stressful because you're worried about money. But here's what the research shows. The difference in happiness between someone earning $5,000 a year and someone earning $50,000 a year is huge. There is a drastic increase in the quality of life. Where you live, having enough to eat, transportation, all of that improves. But what's really, really astounding is that when they measured the difference between people who earn $50,000 a year and $500 million a year, there was very little increase in happiness. It would appear that what we really need is enough to cover the cost of living so that we're not in a constant state of anxiety. Anything more than that will not increase your happiness exponentially. So much for all that talk about making it rain. I think if you want a career that others say doesn't pay enough, and I know that you hear that, and I talk to a lot of you about it, stick to your guns. It would appear to be true that if you do what you love, the money will follow. I think I just gave some advice, but maybe we'll let that go. When you hear that research, though, about the money, it's hard to believe it, because it goes against everything our culture tells us and all the wealthy individuals who are celebrated in the media and on reality television and by the paparazzi. So it's important to know the reason, I think, why our happiness does not increase significantly beyond that $50,000 mark. And that's the second thing I want to mention. It's called the hedonic treadmill, or the hedonic adaptation. And it comes from the word hedonism, which is not a vacation. People from the 70s remember that. Hedonism is the ethical theory that pleasure, in the sense of the satisfaction of desires, is the highest good and proper aim of human life. Essentially, what happens to us as human beings is that we get used to the things that we have, and our happiness levels off and even dips. And we think we need more to get back to that happy place. And it's a never-ending workout on that treadmill. It's also called, simply put, we take things for granted. That's what we do. That's our human nature. That's what the research shows. And it's an inclination that I think you need to learn about and recognize it. Know when it's happening, and constantly question it and catch yourselves. That sounds like advice too, actually. So if it's not money, and we have to watch out for this hedonic treadmill, what will ultimately make us happy? Well, it turns out the very things that we put on the back burner when we are busy studying and working and trying to become independent are the keys to happiness. Relationships, time spent with the people that we care about, and having a variety of experiences. You should also exercise, but I don't have time to get into all of that. You can watch the movie. The best predictor of human happiness is human relationships and the amount of time that people spend with family and friends. According to all of the research, it's significantly more important than money and somewhat more important than health. That's what the data shows. But as Dr. Gilbert points out, the interesting thing is that people will sacrifice social relationships to get the things that won't make them as happy, which is money. So he recommends being a very careful shopper when it comes to happiness. Perhaps a simple camping vacation with the people you care most about will actually be a bigger deposit in your happiness account than that glitzy 3-day cruise. Okinawa, Japan has the largest percentage of people who live to be over 100 years old. Much older, actually. And they're fine. It's considered one of the happiest places on earth. They don't travel a whole lot. They live very simply. But there's an incredible sense of community. The neighbors and friends that they have are truly considered members of their family. The generations aren't separated the way we do it here. The elderly play as large a role in the lives of toddlers as their parents and their siblings do. And clearly it's a formula that works. The last thing I want to leave you with is another important piece of the happiness puzzle. Because I think it's inevitable that when we are happy, we feel like we might lose the happiness through some accident of fate or a tragedy. And in fact, many of us actually fear being too happy, assuming that we're tempting fate if we enjoy our lives too much. Well, it turns out, as a species, we are incredibly resilient. I think some of you already know that. When hit with tragedy and seemingly overwhelming circumstances, we are unhappy, but not for as long as we think we will be, and not as deeply as we assume we will be. As the documentary Happy states, people do really well when really bad things happen. Which is good to know because you're only halfway through your college journey, and many of you have barely started your grown-up lives. There are miles and miles to go, but I'm not worried about any of you. Your hard work has already paid off, and that's why you're sitting here today. And always remember, you are stronger than you know. All the odds are in your favor when you keep the people you love close, and you honor the values that you grew up with, and remind yourself to live in the moment, regardless of your ultimate destination. Congratulations, everyone.